Story 1: The San Andreas Earthquake. Mary was always fascinated by natural phenomena. A geology student, she traveled to the small coastal town of San Andreas, known for its proximity to the famous San Andreas Fault. Mary was determined to study the seismic activity in the region and better understand the earthquakes that had long plagued the area. Upon arrival, Mary checked into a local inn and quickly began exploring the town. She met Peter, a local tour guide who also had a keen interest in earthquakes and knew the town's stories and legends well. "Welcome to San Andreas," Peter said, smiling warmly. "You chose a good place to study earthquakes. This area is rich in seismic activity." "Thank you, Peter. I'm really excited to learn more about this region," Mary replied. "Can you tell me more about the earthquakes that have happened here?" Peter nodded and began recounting stories of past earthquakes. Many years ago, a major earthquake destroyed much of the town. Many people died, and some say the spirits of the victims still roam the area. Mary frowned, intrigued. "Spirits? Do you really believe that?" Peter shrugged. "I don't know if I believe, but many people here have seen strange things. They've heard voices, seen shadows. I can't say they're just stories." Determined to investigate further, Mary decided to join a guided tour to the San Andreas Fault. Peter accompanied her, along with a small group of tourists. The hike was long and tiring, but the landscape was stunning, with towering mountains and deep valleys. As they walked, Peter continued to tell stories about the earthquakes and the sightings of spirits. "There's a cave near the fault that's particularly haunted. They say you can hear the screams of the earthquake victims." Mary was even more intrigued. "Can we visit that cave?" Peter hesitated for a moment but finally agreed. "Yes, we can. But we need to be careful. The area is unstable and dangerous." The group reached the cave in the late afternoon. The entrance was narrow and dark, and a sense of unease gripped everyone. Peter led the way, and Mary followed closely, with the other tourists right behind. Inside the cave, the atmosphere was oppressive. The air was cold and damp, and the walls seemed to absorb the sound, creating an almost absolute silence. Mary turned on her flashlight and explored the cave walls, observing the rock formations and fissures caused by past earthquakes. Suddenly, the ground started to shake. At first, it was a light vibration, but it quickly turned into a strong tremor. Mary lost her balance and fell as rocks fell from the cave's ceiling. "Everyone, out now!" Peter shouted, trying to stay calm. The tourists ran toward the exit, but Mary and Peter were trapped when a large rock blocked the entrance. The earthquake lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity. "We're trapped," Peter said, gasping for breath. "We need to find another way out." Mary got up and tried to calm her breathing. "Let's keep exploring the cave. There must be another exit somewhere." As they moved through the cave, they began to hear voices. They were soft whispers, almost inaudible, but definitely present. "Did you hear that?" Mary asked, looking around. Peter nodded, his eyes wide. "Yes, I heard. It seems we're not alone." The voices grew louder, and shadows began to move on the cave walls. Mary felt a shiver run down her spine. "Peter, this is getting scary." "Let's keep walking," Peter said, trying to stay calm. "We need to get out of here." As they walked, the voices became clearer. "Help us," they whispered. "We're trapped." Mary stopped, trying to understand. "These voices, they seem to be asking for help," Peter agreed. "Maybe they are the spirits of the earthquake victims. They're trapped here, just like us." Determined to help, Mary and Peter began talking to the voices. "We're here to help. What do you want?" Mary asked. The shadows on the walls became more defined, revealing human figures. "We want to be remembered," one of the figures said. "We want our story to be known." Mary felt a wave of compassion. "We will tell your story. We will make sure no one forgets what happened here." The figures seemed to calm down, and the voices diminished. Peter and Mary continued exploring the cave until they finally found a narrow passage that led them to an exit. Emerging from the cave, they felt the warmth of the sun and the fresh air. The other tourists who had managed to escape were waiting outside, relieved to see Mary and Peter safe. "You made it," one of the tourists exclaimed. "We thought you were trapped forever." "It was a scary experience," Mary said, still gasping for breath. "But we got out, and we have an important story to tell." In the following days, Mary and Peter wrote a detailed article about the cave and the voices they heard. The article was widely published, bringing attention to the victims of past earthquakes and the importance of remembering and honoring their memories. Mary returned to her university with a new understanding of earthquakes and their impact on people's lives. Peter continued his work as a tour guide, but now with a new perspective on the town's legends. Story 2: The Perfect Storm. Laura always had a passion for meteorology. Studying the forces of nature and predicting weather events was her calling. Her career took her to many places, but few intrigued her as much as the small port town of Ocean View on the Gulf of Mexico. The town was known for being frequently hit by hurricanes, and Laura was sent to monitor a storm forming in the Gulf. Upon arriving in town, Laura was greeted with cloudy skies and strong winds. The sea was rough, and the residents seemed nervous, accustomed to the constant threat of devastating storms. She checked into a cozy inn near the port. That afternoon, Laura decided to explore the town and talk to residents about their experiences with hurricanes. This is how she met Carl, a local fisherman who had lived in Ocean View his entire life. Carl was a robust man with sun-weathered skin and eyes that seemed to know the sea's secrets. "Welcome to Ocean View," Carl said, shaking Laura's hand. "You've arrived at an interesting time. It looks like a big storm is on the way." "Yes, I'm here to monitor the storm and try to predict its impact," Laura replied. "You've been through many hurricanes, right?" Carl nodded with a sad smile. "Yes, many, and each one leaves its mark. But there's more than just the wind and rain. There are things in the sea that appear during storms, things that most people don't believe." Laura was intrigued. "What do you mean by that?" "There are stories of creatures that appear in the waters during storms," Carl explained. "Humanoid creatures, like lost sailors, but with something strange about them. Some say they are spirits of old sailors, others say they are sea monsters. I saw something once, and I've never forgotten." Laura decided she needed to know more. "Can you tell me what you saw?" Carl looked out at the horizon, as if reliving the memory. "It was many years ago, during a hurricane. I was at sea, trying to save my boat. The waves were enormous, and the wind seemed to want to tear me from the vessel. Then I saw something in the water. At first, I thought it was a man, but as it got closer, I saw it wasn't entirely human. Its eyes were of a deep darkness, and it looked at me as if seeing through me. I was never the same after that night." Laura felt a chill run down her spine. "That's scary. Have others seen these creatures?" Carl nodded. "Yes, many fishermen have similar stories, but no one likes to talk about it. It's like mentioning it calls those things back." In the following days, Laura continued to monitor the storm and collect data. The barometric pressure was dropping rapidly, and the winds were intensifying. She knew she was about to face one of the biggest storms of her career. On the night the storm reached its peak, Laura and Carl decided to take shelter in an old coastal warehouse. The building was sturdy, built to withstand storms, but even so, the force of nature was intimidating. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, and the rain fell with brutal intensity. "We'll stay here until the storm passes," Carl said, sealing the windows. "This place has protected us before." Laura nodded, adjusting her equipment. "I hope we have good luck." As the storm worsened, the warehouse began to shake. Seawater flooded the area around the building. Laura and Carl were soaked but safe inside the shelter. Suddenly, they heard a strange noise coming from the water. It was a guttural sound like a lament. Carl looked at Laura, his eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," she replied, her voice trembling. "What was that?" Carl approached the window, trying to see through the torrential rain. "It could be one of those creatures I told you about." Laura grabbed her camera, determined to document anything she saw. She approached the window next to Carl and looked outside. What she saw made her heart race. Dark figures were emerging from the turbulent waters. They were humanoid, but their forms were indistinct, almost spectral. The creatures' eyes glowed with a strange light, and they seemed to be observing the warehouse. "My God, what are those things?" Laura murmured as she filmed the figures. "I don't know," Carl replied, stepping back. "But they don't look friendly." The creatures began moving toward the warehouse, their elongated hands and thin fingers touching the structure. Laura and Carl felt a strange vibration, as if the warehouse was being sucked by an invisible force. "We need to get out of here," Carl shouted, pulling Laura away from the window. But before they could move, the warehouse door was burst open by a wave of water. The creatures invaded the space, moving with frightening agility. Laura and Carl were pushed to the back of the warehouse, trying to escape the creature's grasp. Laura felt a cold, wet hand grab her arm. She looked back and saw the face of one of the creatures, so close she could feel its icy breath. Desperate, she kicked and struggled, managing to break free. "Carl, we need to fight," she shouted, looking for anything she could use as a weapon. Carl found an iron bar and started striking the creatures, trying to push them back. Laura did the same, picking up a plank and attacking the dark figure. The fight was fierce, and the water continued to rise, making every movement harder. Finally, a powerful wave threw the creatures out of the warehouse. Laura and Carl took the opportunity to close the door and block the entrance with everything they could find. Panting and exhausted, they looked at each other, trying to understand what had just happened. "Do you think they'll come back?" Laura asked, still trembling with fear. "I hope not," Carl replied, "but we need to stay alert." The storm continued to rage outside, but the creatures did not return. When dawn finally broke, the storm had passed, and the warehouse was partially flooded but still standing. Laura and Carl cautiously stepped outside, surveying the damage around them. The sea was calm, and the sunlight began to illuminate the destruction left by the storm. "We made it," Carl said, sighing with relief. Laura looked out at the sea, still feeling the presence of the creatures in the depths. "Carl, what do you think those things were?" "I don't know," he replied, "but I think they were spirits of old sailors, trapped between our world and the sea." In the following days, Laura and Carl shared their story with the community. The local authorities started an investigation, but few believed the more supernatural parts of the account. However, the residents of Ocean View knew there was something special about the stories Laura and Carl told. Laura returned to her job, but never forgot the experience in Ocean View. She wrote a detailed article about the storm and the creatures they encountered, bringing a new perspective on natural disasters and their possible connections to the supernatural. And so the second story of Tales of Terror, Survivor Stories of Natural Disasters, comes to an end. Each tale reveals the depth of the unknown and the courage of those who face their fears. Get ready, for the next story will be equally disturbing and revealing. Story 3. The Forest Fire. Michael was a veteran firefighter, accustomed to facing the most dangerous challenges nature could offer. With years of experience, he had seen firsthand the devastation caused by the wildfires that ravaged California. Every time a new fire season began, he knew his courage and determination would be tested once again. Sophia was an environmental journalist, determined to document the effects of the fires and the firefighters' struggle to contain them. She was assigned to accompany Michael and his team during one of the worst fire seasons the state had ever faced. Upon arriving at the firefighters' camp, she was greeted by Michael, who looked at her with skepticism. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, shaking Sophia's hand. "This job isn't easy, and the forest can be a very dangerous place." Sophia smiled, determined. "I'm ready. I want to show the world what you face here, and maybe inspire more people to take care of our environment." Michael nodded, respecting her determination. "Very well. Stay close to me and follow my instructions. The last thing we need is another person to rescue." In the following days, Sophia accompanied Michael and his team on their firefighting missions. She documented the firefighters' tireless efforts, capturing images of courage and exhaustion. But she also noticed something else: a strange, unsettling atmosphere in the areas most affected by the fire. "Have you heard the stories about spirits in the forest?" Sophia asked Michael as they took a brief rest. Michael frowned. "Yes, I've heard a few stories. They say the spirits of fire victims still roam here, especially in the most burned areas. Some people say they've seen dark figures among the trees." Sophia felt a chill. "Do you believe those stories?" Michael shrugged. "I don't know, but I know this forest has seen a lot of tragedy. And sometimes it feels like there's something more here, something we can't see." Their conversation was interrupted when an emergency call came in. A new fire had started in a remote part of the forest, and Michael's team was sent to contain it. Sophia decided to go along, determined to document every moment. They arrived at the fire site in the early evening, when the flames were already high and the smoke made it hard to breathe. Michael divided the team and began coordinating efforts to control the fire. Sophia followed closely, filming and photographing the desperate struggle against the flames. Suddenly, the wind changed direction, spreading the fire quickly. The team was forced to retreat, and Michael realized he and Sophia were being separated from the rest of the group. "We need to get out of here," Michael shouted, pulling Sophia toward a safer area. But before they could move, they saw skeletal figures emerging from the flames. The figures seemed made of smoke and ash, their eyes glowing with a supernatural light. They moved slowly as if searching for something. "What is that?" Sophia exclaimed, terrified. "I don't know," Michael replied, trying to stay calm. "But we need to get out of here now." The figures began to approach, and Michael and Sophia were forced to run. As they ran, the figures followed them, moving with frightening agility. Michael and Sophia stumbled and fell several times but kept fighting to escape. Finally, they found a clearing where the fire had not yet reached. Panting and covered in soot, they stopped to catch their breath. "Did you see that?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. "I did," Michael replied. "And I've never seen anything like it. We need to find out what those things are and why they're chasing us." As they tried to understand what they had seen, the figures began to surround the clearing. Michael and Sophia realized they were cornered. "We have to fight," Michael said, grabbing a charred piece of wood as a weapon. Sophia did the same, determined to defend herself. "Let's face them together." The figures approached, their eyes glowing with even greater intensity. When they were almost within reach, Michael shouted, "What do you want from us?" One of the figures stopped and, to Michael and Sophia's surprise, began to speak. "We want justice. We want to be remembered." Michael and Sophia looked at each other, confused. "Remembered?" Sophia asked. The figure nodded. "We were victims of the fires. We died here, and our spirits were trapped. No one remembers us. No one cares." Michael felt a wave of compassion. "We care. We're here to document what's happening, to show the world the destruction and loss." The figures began to dissipate as if finding some peace in Michael's words. "Remember us," the figure whispered before disappearing completely. Michael and Sophia stood in silence for a moment, absorbing what had happened. They knew they had a greater responsibility now, not just to fight the fire, but also to honor the victims' memories. When they finally made it back to the camp, they shared their experience with the team. Some were skeptical, but others, who also had stories of strange sightings, believed them. In the following days, Sophia wrote a detailed article about the fires and the figures they saw. Her account brought a new dimension to the firefighters' work, showing not just the fight against the fire, but also the connection with the forest's lost souls. Sophia's article was widely published, bringing attention to the need to remember and honor the victims of natural disasters. The community came together to create a memorial in the forest, a place where families could pay tribute to those lost. Michael continued his work as a firefighter, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that each fire was not just a battle against nature, but also an opportunity to remember and respect those who lost their lives.